so you've chosen for me to read Edenbrooke by Julianne Donaldson, and I'm about 50% into it, and this has been a journey. Not necessarily like in a bad way, but honestly, this book has been putting me to sleep. I'm not even joking. I have fell asleep like about 3 times while reading this book with my eyeballs. Trying to keep my eyes open and read this book physically has been a bit of a challenge. We finally kind of got to a point that's been interesting now. I don't know if I like the interesting it took. Like, it's adding some angst to the plot, but I don't know if I like it. I don't know. It's almost like our main character is self-sabotaging, but like, I'll get into that. Let me just summarize the plot of this book. I know I did that kind of in the intro, but I will allow me to, summarize it in my own words now that I've read like 50% into it. But essentially, we are following this girl named Mary Ann, and she has been living in Bath, I believe, with her grandmother since her mom has passed away. Her dad kind of left her there, and she's been sort of stuck there. She's not super thrilled about it. She'd rather be anywhere else but Bath, and that's when her twin sister Cecily ends up inviting her to this estate in Edenbrooke. I believe she's like wooing the eldest sibling of Edenbrooke there at the estate or whatever. So she ends up being able to travel there, and her grandmother decided to give her like this big inheritance, especially given like what like her dad has done. She's decided to change over her will and give her the inheritance to Mary Ann, but as long as she becomes like an elegant lady. So she's working on doing that. While she's at Edenbrooke, there she meets this guy. His name is Philip, and part of her wants to not like him. Like, I feel like every part of her is screaming at her to not like him, but she kind of can't help it, and she tries to call whatever is going on between them a friendship, but we know that's obviously not the case, that she does have romantic feelings for him, and maybe him for her. That's they kind of, you know, are hanging out, and they're getting to know each other on like a deeper level, and that's all I'll say on that. And honestly, with the plot being that, like, I don't know, I just kind of found it boring. It was giving me slight Desire and Decorum vibes, which, if you know me, you know I love Desire and Decorum. There's definitely like little like hints, I guess, of Desire and Decorum in there, like, you know, with wanting to become a lady and inheritance and all that jazz, I guess. But aside from that, the plot itself is kind of boring. Like I said, I don't know if it's this plot or the writing that's putting me to sleep, but I'm getting pretty bored easily of this book, and I'm just like it was a struggle to get to the 50% mark. Like I said, I kept falling asleep, and like I would rather be sleeping while reading this book, and the only part that's really keeping me awake now is the part that it's got interesting at. So it's making me somewhat want to continue, but I don't know if I like the conflict that's currently occurring. I like the characters, don't get me wrong, but I'm kind of feeling like Mary Ann, to some like, obviously is kind of a likable narrator, but honestly now she's kind of like very much woe is me. I don't know, and not like it's getting irritating and annoying. Like, I think you can have an unlikable protagonist in a book and whatever, it can be fine, but like, given this is a book where Mary Ann's not necessarily supposed to be like she's supposed to be a likable protagonist, and I'm not liking her. I mean, like, I like her to some extent, you know. She's like a nice girl. She's a bit quirky, and I like her weirdness, but I don't know, she doesn't have a backbone. Maybe that's what I'm missing. She's not willing to fight for what she wants, and maybe that's part of the point of this, is that she's gonna grow and actually, you know, fight for what she wants and, you know, be who she is, and maybe that's the point of all this. But like, she doesn't want to fight for what she wants. She was happy, things were going well for her, and now she's kind of giving up on things too easily now that like things have taken a turn for her, and now all of a sudden she's just giving up on everything, and she's like, I hate life, I hate everything, and I'm going to do this now, even though this is not what I want to do. I'm just gonna self-sabotage and do the things that I don't want to do, because that seems like the right thing to do. Let's just do what I don't want to do. No one's telling her not to do this, but she's decided in her own heart that she's not gonna do this, you know, not thinking of anyone else's feelings except her own, and not even like her own in a positive way. But I mean, I think that's also part of the story, is that she's a people pleaser and does things for other people, and she cares about other people's feelings more than her own. Coming from a fellow people pleaser myself, I feel like people pleasers tend to be like, we care about other people's feelings to some extent, I think, more than our own, but at the same time there's still enough care for our own emotions that we're not gonna self-sabotage, at least in my case, I don't find myself self-sabotaging. Like, I'm not the kind of person that I guess like will back off. Like, I'm a communicator though too, so we're getting some heavy miscommunication stuff now. The romance is a positive to this book, I will say. I really like Philip. He is nice. He's sweet. I do enjoy him. Like, I feel like kind of in their first interaction, she wasn't really thrilled about him, but he kind of like right off the bat was like apologized for any like rudeness, which I really appreciated from him. I'm like, oh, look at that. So it wasn't going that direction, and then she tried to convince herself that this is friendship. It was not friendship. Developing between the two of them, but you know, he's been a really sweet love interest. So I do like him. So I do want to root for him and Marianne. But my goodness, Marianne. Maybe I like the flirty kind of characters, and I feel like the flirty, fun, lighthearted characters, and I feel like we don't see enough of it. And I've been dealing with too many grumpy characters lately. That, you know, it's always refreshing to have like a fun, flirty guy. That's more my type. I like some grumpy guys, but that's not my favorite thing. I'd rather have the fun, flirty ones. Like, Marianne is just making me want to pull my hair out, and I'm kind of getting a bit of a headache now, maybe talking about her. Hopefully this book starts to take a positive direction, I guess. Maybe with this angst, maybe that'll make the story more interesting and more compelling, because I was waiting for some conflict, and we weren't really having any up until this point, and I feel like up to the 50% mark, all of a sudden there's conflict, so hopefully it decides to go in an upward trajectory, and things start to improve and get better over the course of the story, and hopefully I end up liking it more, because I think that Marianne and Philip's relationship is enough to root for, but like, there wasn't enough for me to root for before, which I think was my struggle with the romance. Like, I liked it, but like, there wasn't a lot to root for it. Like, there was no like angst and tension, or like, there wasn't any conflict with it. Like, aside from her feeling like it was friendship, there wasn't like any internal or external conflict to get you to root for the characters together. And if there's none of that, it's just like a slowly anticipating story rather than like a slow burn story. So, and I'm more of a slow burn girl, like a slowly anticipating, like that's boring. Like, you're just like, okay, well, why aren't you guys together yet? That is Edenbrooke. So I don't see myself having a lot to say about this book, aside from this, so I will probably just update you once I finish it and give you my final thoughts. I have Kool-Aid for the straw. It's very exciting. It is actually. I say it not excitingly, but it actually is exciting because, like I said, I have my wisdom teeth taken out and I'm not supposed to drink with a straw, so now I'm rebelling. Edenbrooke, I finished it. I think I'm giving it 3 stars. This was disappointing to say the least. There are a lot of issues I had with this book, but I will say there's positives too. Like, I wouldn't say this book is bad outwardly. I wouldn't call this book bad. It just wasn't great. You know, I go into any book thinking, you know, I want it to be great for the most part, unless like I'm going into a book expecting to hate it. But I feel like with most books, especially if I've heard something about it, I have some sort of expectation going into it, and if that expectation's not met, then there's gonna be disappointment. The main character, my goodness, oh gosh. I've never read about a more woe is me, oblivious kind of main character in my life. Like, my goodness, she was so oblivious and so woe is me, and that is not fun to read about, okay? Like, if you're gonna use it as a plot line to be like, oh, you know, I learned a lot and like I should be able to like fight for what I want and I'm not gonna be happy unless I do that. If that was the overarching plot here and that's what we were gonna get out of the story, then by all means it might have been more interesting to follow, and if that's like how we are going to develop our protagonist, who I now can no longer remember the name of, Marianne, it took me a second. If that was the overarching plot and that's what we're gonna get out of the book, then sure, by all means, if you were trying to say something with it, then fine, but my goodness, nothing was said out of it, and she was just so annoying, and the author seems sort of aware of this, maybe not the woe is me part, but the oblivious part, and how oblivious this main character is, and, you know, maybe I can give her some grace as that, you know, this is a historical romance, and she's not experienced in romance at all. I'll allow her some grace, I guess, with the obliviousness and, like, being able to tell when somebody likes you. I'll allow her some grace there, but it couldn't have not been more obvious. Because, like I said, when I was younger, I was that oblivious too. So, I'll give her some grace, but it wasn't fun to read about her being extremely oblivious. She's like, oh, I wonder if he likes me. Like, maybe he doesn't feel the same. And I'm like, it couldn't be more obvious to me that he likes her, because he was basically, like, he had to spell it out for her at this point for her to, like, actually believe he had feelings for her. I was gonna, you know, come and say I hate the sister in this story. We met the sister in the second half of the book, and I was gonna come here and tell you I hated her, but she redeemed herself. But she was hateable at a point, and you were kind of supposed to not like her. She was very self-centered, and I didn't really like the way she treated Marianne Marianne, in defense of Marianne for a second here. But Marianne at the same time was almost like allowing the self-centeredness and like, I don't know if their like conclusion, like the conclusion involved Cecily realizing she was self-centered on her own rather than Marianne having to tell her. So I guess Cecily is not as not as oblivious as Marianne seems to be, or I guess Cecily's a little bit more self-aware. Romance was a positive. I did like it, but I think it more so had to do with me liking the romance hero and really liking him as a character more than it did for rooting these characters together. Now, I felt like the third act conflict was like basically the second half of the book. It was instead of like a third act, it was like the second and third act conflict, or half the second act anyways. It just felt like it was going on for so long, and while I would say the second half of the book was more interesting to read about, like it didn't put me to sleep like the first half did, at the same time I was still kind of, to some extent I was missing a bit of the romance. Like I wanted to see more of it, and like seeing Marianne push Philip away every chance she got was not fun to read about, and we just saw her like yearning from afar when like he made it, pretty much kind of spell it out for her, made it pretty clear he wanted to spend time with her, or like it was all of her own doing, and reading from a self-sabotaging main character as well was also not fun. Like for miscommunication was like the main conflict here, and if our main character knew how to communicate, majority of the problems in this book would have been solved. He couldn't have made it more clear. Like I'm like he was literally writing a love letter about her right in front of her face. I don't know how clear he can get. But Marianne had no idea how to communicate anything, which was really just frustrating. And also just seeing her self-sabotage to make a conflict happen is not entertaining to read about, which, I mean, something I've learned about from writing is I definitely wrote some self-sabotaging main characters in my past, hence why those works have never seen the light of day, or they just need to be fixed so I don't have a self-sabotaging main character, because I think when the conflict is oneself, like to some instance that can be interesting depending on how it's done. Like I said, you can most likely do almost anything well in a book and make people like it if it's done well. But this is one of those times it felt like conflict felt so forced because the main character was forcing the conflict on herself. She was forcing herself to be upset towards the happiness of others, and it wasn't a fun time to read about. I feel like there's some shows, you know, and things like out there, like characters out there who you don't necessarily agree with their decisions necessarily. I would say I necessarily disagreed with Marianne's decisions, but I disagreed with like her self-sabotaging. It was just too much, and it got really annoying. The romance is a positive. The romance was really cute. Seeing them get together in the end was cute, heartwarming. I wanted more out of this book than I guess I got. There's a lot that could have been done better to make this book more enjoyable. 3 stars. That's how I feel about this book. Now, you were probably wondering, Emily, was this book, despite all its flaws, better than The Dutch of Steel? And unfortunately for you, you have clicked on the wrong video. So I will link you to The Dutch of Steel, which I just had a better time with. And you can see my reaction to that, and we'll wrap up this vlog.